Coach's Corner is your source. Baseball, football, soccer, and hoops. The Coach's Corner has the scoop. It's the Coach's Corner with Andy.
Covering Tri-State sports, it's the Coach's Corner with Andy on 92.1 The GOAT.
It's the Coach's Corner.
Hey, welcome to the Coach's Corner. I'm Andy. I have a special guest here with me today, Mr. Adam Burke. He's the managing editor at VSIN, which is Vegas Sports Information Network. We love having you guys on here. It's always fun to talk sports and sports betting. Now, VSIN is a sports betting network that is solely dedicated 24/7 to sports betting, correct?
Yeah, we have a 24/7 broadcast channel, and we also have a very robust website. And as you mentioned, I'm the managing editor over there. We got a lot of great content for March Madness and also, the start of the MLB season with opening day. So plenty of things to be excited about right now in the sports world, and we're covering all of it.
Yeah, it's an exciting time for any sports fan. What's it like working for a sports betting network? Do your friends and family constantly ask you for betting advice?
Yeah, honestly, it's one of those things where, I try not to talk about it too much when I'm with my friends because, when you're doing it all day, every day, you kind of want to have some separation at times. So fortunately for me, outside of my friends here that are coworkers of mine, all my friends from back home, because I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, we very rarely talk sports betting. So it's a nice little escape. My family's not too invested in it. My wife has no idea what I'm talking about, but it's definitely, it's interesting. And especially being out here in Vegas where, I know it's legal across the United States in 40 different states now and jurisdictions, but being out here in Vegas, it's still special. There's still a buzz when you get big events, and it's not bad to go down to Circa, when I go into work to be on air, something like that, and see the sports book that's there.
Yeah. You mentioned why your wife not knowing what you're talking about. My wife is the exact same way. I just got into sports betting. I don't go too deep into it. I might throw $10-15 down on, a parlay or something like that, like a 4 or 5 leg parlay. But I'll be sitting there on my phone and I'm scrolling through it. And she's like, "What are you looking at?" And I was like, "This is a really important game. I have to watch what happens." And she just shakes her head at me and we move on. But nonetheless,
I'll tell you what, yesterday I went downtown because I had a spot on air on our show Money Moves with Stormy Bonantoni and Matt Brown. And I had told my wife a few weeks ago that Bill Nye, the science guy, was on some kind of podcast. I think it was an MLB podcast or something like that. And he picked the Guardians to win the World Series. So, of course, being my hometown team, and, she lived with me in Cleveland for about 18 years before I moved to Vegas. She's like, "You have to put a futures bet in for me on the Guardians to win the World Series." So I was like, all right, I had to go to the kiosk and get a ticket printed, and, she'll have a nice $20 souvenir when it probably doesn't happen. But
yeah,
I mean, hey, when a hero of your childhood, like Bill Nye, calls something, you got to act on it, right?
Exactly. Everybody loves Bill Nye. He knows science. He's never wrong.
Right. Exactly.
So I did mention a little bit about I just recently kind of got a little bit more serious about sports betting, if you want to call it that. I'm not very good at it. I tend to add I like doing the parlay, like the same game parlays and stuff like that. And I tend to add too many legs to the parlay. Does that seem to be most people's problem when they're doing sports betting?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of people look at it as, you can bet a little to win a lot, right? And you see, and the sports books are very, very good about this, and the betting influencer accounts are very good about this. You always see the $5 parlay that wins 70 grand. You don't see the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of $5 parlays that didn't win. So, look, I mean, it's all about, it's the cliche things, right? Betting within your means, don't bet what you can't afford to lose, all that kind of thing. Right. If you're doing this for entertainment and that's going to be your vessel and you want to do, a $10 5-leg parlay, that's fine. You can have fun with it. It's at the end of the day, for a lot of people, it's just entertainment. For what we do, for the audience that we have, it is a lot more straight betting. It is kind of a lot more of the, I don't want to say old school approach, because that's not the right way to put it, but it's kind of preaching a lot of the bankroll responsibility, bankroll management, those kinds of things. Because for a lot of people, I mean, the idea of betting $110 to win 100 doesn't sound super appealing. But if you can bet $100 to win, potentially life-changing money, even though the degree of difficulty is much harder with a parlay, people are interested in doing that because, like I said, for most people, it's just an entertainment medium. And, I think that's something that kind of gets lost sometimes, where we maybe sometimes take it too seriously, those of us that cover it in the industry, just knowing that the vast, vast majority of people are just doing it to have fun or have some action on a game that they're watching just to make it more interesting.
Yeah, the I would say the NFL this season kind of reeled me in to sports betting. I really enjoyed it. I had fun doing it. I'm a Commanders fan, so it was even more fun that my team was winning. And I could win some money off, betting on the players or the team itself. So it's actually gotten me, I'm more for the entertainment purpose, like you said, and it's actually gotten me into other sports that I've always been interested in and I've liked, but now I know more about the sport because when you bet on sports, you have to pay attention. You have to kind of know what you're doing, know who's hot at the moment, know who's on, what teams are on a winning streak, what teams are the stronger team than the other. There's so many factors that go into it. And like for the NBA, for an example, for me, I always loved basketball. I played basketball in high school. Loved playing basketball, like pickup games, but I never really got into the NBA. I was more of a college basketball guy. And even then, I don't know much about college. But this past season, I have been into the NBA like no other. And my wife, she's like, "Since when do you watch NBA games?" And I was like, "Well, since I got money riding on it, that's when." But it's been fun, and you discover players that you might not see that don't get that mainstream media attention, like your Luka Doncic, your LeBron James, just to name a few, grabbing headlines lately. You got players like what's his name? I think plays for the Kings. Keon Ellis. Am I saying his name correctly?
I'm not. Admittedly, the NBA is the one sports betting market I don't really get into.
Okay.
Because you can have a bet and then 30 minutes before the game, like someone's sitting out for load management, or they tweaked a calf, or it's the one sport. I played hockey in high school, so
cool.
that's a sport that I've kind of tried to get into a little bit more again, just because of the betting aspect. But the NBA is the one that I just feel like I could never crack and wouldn't have the patience to bet it with the way that the news comes out so late.
Yeah, it can be tough sometimes, but I found it fun. There's not really a sport like a mainstream sport like your hockey, your basketball, your baseball, football that I don't enjoy at least betting some on. Baseball, I haven't really been too much into, and I want to kind of talk a little bit about. We got opening day coming up tomorrow, so I kind of want to cover. We're going to talk about the O's and the Nats. They're the local teams around here. You said you're a Guardians fan as well because you grew up in Ohio, right? Mm-hmm. So first of all, before we get into the teams, when you bet on baseball, what kind of bets can people kind of look for? What would you suggest would be the smarter play? Like, I know you can bet on how many hits a player gets. You can bet on how many strikeouts a pitcher gets, and your basic stuff. Obviously, you can bet the money line. I believe there's over under in runs scored. What would you say is the best option if somebody was looking to go bet on a game?
Yeah, I mean, to say the best option, I mean, it's going to depend on the game. It's going to depend on the matchup. For example, like I feel like one of my strengths when it comes to handicapping baseball is betting the full games, betting the full 9 innings, because I'm somebody who's really, really deep into analyzing bullpens, knowing who's available, bullpen usage, what kind of form guys are in, stuff like that, because you can get some good advantages if you can isolate, maybe a bad bullpen that is performing at a higher level, or maybe go against a good bullpen that doesn't have their top guys, something like that. But for a lot of people, they like to bet first 5 wagers, whether it's first 5 team total, a first 5 money line, a first 5 total, something like that, because you can assume, certainly not over the first couple weeks of the season, but you can assume that most starters are going to go about 5 innings, maximum, right? If they're pitching well, they're going to go 5 innings. If they're not pitching well, they're going to wind up getting, coming up short of that. So, it's much like thinking about a first half bet, whether it's basketball, football, something to that effect, but it's just the first 5 innings. And so you also know that both teams are going to hit 5 times. If you bet a full game, let's say you bet a run line on a favorite, a home favorite, something like that, they may only bat 8 times. They may not hit in the bottom of the 9th to give you an extra opportunity to score runs. So a lot of people really like to do the first 5 betting because they feel like it takes some of the late game variance out of the equation, where maybe a manager wants to try a guy in a high leverage spot that night, and you have no idea. You don't know that. and it winds up backfiring. But at least you know that starting pitcher. You know he's going to be out there. You know the starting lineup is going to be out there. So a lot of people like to do the first five stuff. And of course, prop betting, betting on pitcher strikeouts, pitcher outs. Those are two really big markets. And then also, for hitters, a lot of people like to bet guys to hit home runs. Home runs are exciting. They're fun to root for. People like to bet on things that are going to bring them some kind of joy, have them compelled, something like that. And, the home run is outside of stealing home, probably the most exciting play in baseball. So people love to bet on those things. I know certain sports books have days where they have, elevated odds, boosted odds on those things, stuff like that. So, I mean, look, the world is your oyster when it comes to betting because there's so much demand that there's a very, very large amount of supply. And you can find just about anything you want to bet on across all sports, including baseball.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this season, not only for the aspect of the sport for baseball, but when I got a little more into sports betting, the baseball season was ending. So it was the postseason, the World Series or playoffs and World Series was coming up, and football was also going on at the same time. So I didn't really get to focus too much on it. I'm excited to focus on it now as when the season opens up. And I'm also excited because, like you're a fan of your hometown team. I'm a fan of my hometown team, the Orioles. And they had a pretty good season. I'd say a respectable season last year. But they had Corbin Burns, the starting pitcher, or I guess you could call him he was projected to be their ace last year, but he got hurt obviously through the season, kind of derailed their hopes a little bit. They kind of floundered in the AL East a little bit, still had a respectable season. Do you think the rotation's still an issue going into this year for Baltimore? And do you think it'll affect them in the long run?
Yeah, I mean, the rotation is definitely still an issue, especially with Grayson Rodriguez's status very much up in the air. I mean, who knows what you'll get out of Kyle Bradish if he's able to come back, really late in the second half of the season here. Trevor Rogers is a guy I think they were excited about, and we'll see how long it takes to wind up getting him back. But the Grayson Rodriguez thing is definitely an issue. That being said, I mean, it has not been a good spring training for the American League East. I mean, obviously Garrett Cole is hurt for the Yankees. Luis Heel is injured as well. Now Clark Schmidt getting dinged. The Red Sox are missing starting pitchers. Brian Bayo, Cutter Crawford, Lucas Giolito's hurt again, which is no big surprise. For Tampa Bay, Shane McClanahan goes down again now. So, it's not like the Orioles are alone in terms of having some concerns with the starting rotation. They're not alone in the lineup being better than the rotation, better than the pitching staff as a whole, because that's most of the American League East at this point in time. But I will say the one thing that I think is a big separator for Baltimore, and also a reason to bet on them to get off to a good start here, their bullpen is fantastic. You get Felix Bautista back now. Yenier Cano's a guy that's probably going to be better equipped for the long haul of the season this time around. Sir Anthony Dominguez is still a really, really good reliever. They've got multiple guys they can use in high leverage. And also Albert Suarez is a guy who kind of saved this rotation last year. And if they carve out a role for him in the bullpen, I think he's a guy who could be a very valuable arm or maybe a swingman type of guy. Because keep in mind, and I noticed the Guardians do this with their roster construction going into the year, you've got a lot of six-man rotations nowadays. You have a lot of pitchers that do the five and fly thing. And early on in the season, bullpens are going to be really critical. And if you have a multi-inning type of reliever that you can rely on maybe 3 times a week, that's a good bridge from your starter to your, high leverage types of guys. So I actually like Baltimore to win this division. I like a lot of the pieces in the lineup, obviously. I know Gunnar Henderson's banged up right now, but I just think their bullpen is such a big separator for them that I think they can ultimately outlast the Yankees, who knows what they get from Stanton, and they're a Judge injury away from not being very good. And I don't think Boston's there yet. So I think Baltimore is the team to beat in the AL East, but it probably will come down to the last week of the season.
Yeah, and like you talked about bullpens being critical in the beginning of the season, and consistency is probably one of the biggest key factors for that bullpen throughout the whole season. It's a long baseball season, and we all know bullpens look different come postseason push, even into the postseason. So yeah, it's all about managing and being consistent, like you said, with your not only your starting rotation but your full bullpen as well. I want to go kind of to the more of the I guess you could say, well, it's offense and defense in baseball, but let's go to like the hitting and fielding players. What do you think about Jackson Holliday? How do you think he'll rebound from last season? We all know he got called up early and got sent back down to the minors to improve his game a little bit more. I've heard good things so far. from sports resources and stuff like that. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, look, this is a kid with an elite skill set, right? I mean, he was destined to be a very high draft pick, be one of the top players. He's hit at every level in the minor leagues. I mean, it's the biggest jump in sport to go from double A or triple A to the big leagues. I mean, the command that pitchers have is just so much sharper. Obviously, a lot of guys throw with velocity now, but a lot of guys in the minor leagues don't know where their velocity is going. Guys at the big league level, they can put it where they want to more often than not and not sacrifice velo in the process. So I'm not surprised that Holiday struggled. That being said, I mean, he's always been a kid with a high walk rate, and the strikeouts kind of come a little bit because when you see a lot of pitches, you are going to strike out.
Mhm.
But he felt overpowered last year. But he went down to the minor leagues, did what he had to do, wound up putting up really good numbers once again. And, still when he made contact, he didn't make a lot of contact at the MLB level, but when he made contact, he had a 45% hard hit rate. League average is around 39%. So we were still seeing the bat to ball skills, still seeing a little bit of the barrel skills that he has when he did make contact. And so I think that's the biggest thing for him is just, being more consistent in terms of attacking the pitches that you want, laying off of the pitches that are out of the zone. He got overpowered in the strike zone quite a bit. His zone contact percentage was only 81%. That was definitely on the lower end of the league. So pitchers were willing to challenge him. I think this year, he's got a chance to be a much better hitter. And if that contact authority follows, he may be a guy at the bottom of this lineup that could be, a 20 home run type of dude, probably hitting the 250, 260 range, but walk a lot. I think he really lengthens this lineup if he's going to be able to perform up to his potential. And I think he'll be much closer to it this year.
Yeah, they'll definitely be a fun team to watch with Holiday on the team, and if Henderson can get healthy and all their other young talent they have. I want to kind of go on to the other side of the Beltway, I guess you could call it, and talk about the Nationals a little bit. They're the other local team around here. They finished at 71-91 last season. A lot of people are predicting that they're maybe a year or so, or maybe an ownership change away from becoming a contender again. They're very young, like Baltimore. They have a lot of young talent. Dylan Cruz, James Wood, Luis Garcia Jr., Jacob Young, just to name a few. What are your thoughts on the Nationals this season? They play in a tough NL East division because you got the Braves, the Mets, and the Phillies, three teams that have, kind of really improved over the past couple of years and are tough to beat. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so the Nationals, one of my favorite season win total bets is over 72.5 wins for the Nationals. I think this team is absolutely better than last year's team, although DJ Herz going down and probably needing Tommy John is definitely a really disappointing thing because he's a guy I think had a lot of upside in this rotation. And they won't have Josiah Gray. Cade Cavalli is still trying to come back from his own Tommy John. But I like this starting rotation in terms of guys that can keep you in a ball game. And this offense should be significantly better this year. You've got Cruz. You saw the Abrams breakout last year. Wood has prolific power, and he's a guy that I think will work out really well being mentored by Josh Bell. I think bringing Josh Bell back was a really smart move by them. Him and Wood, there's some similarities kind of to their swing planes and all of that. And if Bell's going to try to elevate the baseball more this season, which he talked about coming into the year, he's going to generate some more power as a guy that's going to have a lot of professional plate appearances for this team. I like a lot of these pieces offensively. The bullpen is not my favorite, but I think this is a team that's definitely going to improve off of last year's record as you get some of those young kids that kind of can make a little bit more of an impact. I still think, there are some minor league arms that could come up and be kind of interesting. It is a tough division, but I think something that we need to focus on here, you used to play 19 games against every team in your division. Recently, they changed the schedule so you play everybody in Major League Baseball. So they scaled it back to 13 games against every team in your division. 18 fewer games against the Braves, Phillies, and Mets is definitely a positive thing for the Nationals. And again, I think their offense is going to take a bit of a significant step up here. I like this team to go over 72.5 wins. They're not going to compete for a playoff spot by any means, but I think 75, 76 wins is very much doable for this team.
Yeah, one of those seasons that doesn't look good on paper, but in the coach's mind and the player's mind, it's an improvement. I agree with you 100%. They added some veteran experience and leadership as well, which is only going to help you in the long run too. I want to switch sports now a little bit, if you're okay with that, and talk a little bit about what's making a lot of the headlines now, which is obviously March Madness. Have you filled out a bracket?
Yeah, I mean, I fill out a bracket. I mean, we did one for our March Mania betting guide over at VSIN.com. For me, obviously, it's definitely much more about the betting aspect of it. But I mean, brackets are definitely fun, and they kind of help you if you have some futures, kind of get an idea for what the draw is going to look like for your team, where you might want to hedge, maybe some other teams you want to get as insurance, stuff like that. So it's all part of the betting and handicapping process, and it's just fun to fill out a bracket every year.
Yeah, I'm a Terps fan. I like the Maryland Terps. I actually picked them. We're doing a bracket at work, and the prize is a day off. So I kind of paid attention a little to what was going on, but I picked my favorites, and I picked Maryland to win it all. I actually picked Maryland and Duke in the championship, a former ACC rival matchup. I mean, that would just draw viewers, right?
Yeah, it would.
If anything. But another team, I guess you could kind of consider them a dark horse since they weren't ranked too high going in, or they weren't ranked as high as some of the other Sweet 16 teams going into the tournament. Ole Miss, lights out from the 3-point line, especially this past game over the weekend. If they stay hot from shooting three, I think they could make it. I don't think they'll make it to the championship game, but maybe past the Sweet 16 round into the Elite Eight. Do you have any other teams that you think maybe aren't in that like top 5 power ranking of teams remaining in the Sweet 16 that you think could make it at least maybe Elite Eight, Final Four?
Yeah, I mean, Ole Miss they're a tough one for me because they played really badly on defense late in the regular season. Now, the SEC has a ton of shot-making teams. They've run into a couple of teams here in the tournament that aren't great at shooting from the outside necessarily, North Carolina and Iowa State, especially with Iowa State losing Keyshawn Gilbert. That was definitely something that was very, very troubling for them going into a game against an Ole Miss team that's really, really good at forcing turnovers. Michigan State's going to have their hands full in that game. I ultimately think Sparty wins, and I hope that they do because a good friend of mine at VSIN has a pretty strong futures position on Michigan State. So I'm hoping that they are able to come through there, but I'll give you a couple here. Alabama's really, really good, but this is going to be a distance shooting contest against BYU. BYU is not going to be afraid of playing up tempo. They're not going to be afraid of taking a bunch of jump shots here, which is what Alabama kind of forces you into defensively. But BYU is really good at protecting the rim. They have one of the lowest shot shares against on close twos per Bart Torvik, which is barttorvik.com, phenomenal college basketball resource. They've only allowed opponents to shoot a ball at the rim on about 24% of their shot attempts. Alabama's going to have to outshoot them from distance here in this game, and that's very tough to do with a BYU team shooting over 37% from threes. So I think it's a high variance type of game with a lot of possessions where BYU, they're kind of well equipped for that type of game. And it's a game where I wouldn't be surprised if we see an upset. I do want to talk about your Terps for a second here because it's a really interesting game. Florida's my national champion. I think Florida's the best team in the country. I love the way that they're coached by Todd Golden. However, there's a path for Maryland to beat them. Now, Maryland's going to have to stay out of foul trouble because the Crab 5 is a really, really good starting lineup, but the depth that they have, not strong at all. They're going to have to stay out of foul trouble. They're going to have to keep Florida off of the offensive glass, which has been a problem for Maryland. In the Big Ten tournament and the NCAA tournament, they've given up 60 offensive rebounds in 4 games. They've got to figure out a way to fix that against Florida. If they can survive those 2 areas, foul trouble and Florida's offensive rebounding prowess, Maryland is very, very live in this game. I think it's a very scary matchup for Florida, who, again, I think is the best team in the country, but in that 1-game format with limited margin for error, I think Maryland puts a real scare into Florida here, and I do like Maryland to cover the spread.
Yeah, I agree with you. Since we're on the topic of the Terps here, I want to ask you the question that you've maybe been asked a bunch of times already. What did you think about the Travel by Queen?
Yeah,
or do you think it was obviously it was a travel?
Yeah, I mean, by the rule of thumb in college basketball, where you don't get that gather step that you get in the NBA, where you could take like 9 steps and nobody calls anything.
Yeah.
It was a travel. I mean, the other thing about this too, and there's a really great book out there called Scorecasting where they kind of talk about some of the home bias of, officiating, right? You just kind of get a fairer whistle because it's a human element. You have a situation where people don't want to be hated. They don't want to be booed. They don't want to have stuff thrown at them, all these kinds of things. When it comes to the NCAA tournament and it's a moment like that, it's very, very hard for any one of those officials to call a travel there. And even though it was, I'm not surprised that it wasn't called. And obviously it's unfortunate for Colorado State. It clearly was a travel, but it's just the human element there. You're trying to monitor the clock. You're trying to make sure he doesn't get fouled. Travel's probably the furthest thing in your mind if you're an official. And so it went uncalled, and it'll be something that's talked about quite a bit if, especially if Maryland's able to beat Florida here.
Yeah. A lot of people were comparing it to if he would have been, a wide open layup for the game winning basket, nobody around him. But I mean, the man had a hand in his face. He's fading away. So I think, like you said, they kind of gave him a little bit of benefit of the doubt. And like you said, traveling was probably the furthest thing from their concerns at that moment. But nonetheless, I liked Colorado State a lot. I actually picked them to, even though I picked Maryland to win it all in my bracket, since it's only for fun, I actually picked Colorado State over Maryland in that game. And I had a little bit of money riding on it. It wasn't a horrible amount that I lost, but yeah, I thought it was going to happen, and it was close. It was a very exciting game to watch. I actually had an appearance with work while the game was going on, but I got home and I caught the tail end of it and I turned it on, and my wife's like, "You don't watch college basketball?" It's like, I do when you're not around, honey.
This sounds like a recurring theme. With your wife kind of asking about stuff. I guess I'll throw out one more, team that I think is very live in an underdog capacity here this weekend, and it's Purdue. This Houston team, they're shooting way better from three than they have in previous seasons, where they've been one of the top, if not the top defenses in the nation. This year, they're shooting well from three, but Purdue's very good about challenging threes. Purdue's as good of a mid-range jump shooting team or better, almost as good of a three-point shooting team. I don't trust really either one of these coaches. I know Matt Painter went to the national championship game last year, but Kelvin Sampson, I mean, they play at such a slow pace. When they get bogged down in the offensive half court, unless they're shooting the lights out, as they have this season, they have problems. I think Purdue wins that game. I think Purdue outright, they are a big underdog here, but I'm going to have Purdue plus the points and also put a little bit on the money line here because I don't like Houston's style of play in the tournament, where if they want to play a game to 62 possessions and they're not going to shoot 35, 36, 38% from three, it's a problem for them. I think Purdue wins this game.
I agree with you 100%. Well, Adam, it's been a pleasure with you. Can you tell us, go ahead, if you want to go ahead and plug the website for VSIN, and if you have any socials you'd like to plug for people could find you and all of your information?
Yeah, so I'm on X at Skating Tripods, which is the name of the beer league hockey team that I used to play for, now defunct, but we had a lot of good times.
That sounds
over
fun.
Over at VSIN.com right now, our $9.99 special, you get a month as a VSIN Pro subscriber, which is an all-access pass to everything that we do. So it's basically a test drive. And, I previewed all 30 MLB teams. We're going to have a couple of different daily MLB articles. We're previewing every March Madness game. We got a lot of stuff going on over there right now. And of course, my senior editor, Zachary Cohen, our resident NBA expert, doing daily NBA best bets. You can follow us on X at VSIN Live, and plenty of ways to get our broadcast channel, plenty of ways to check out our content. It's a good resource for people that want to learn more about sports betting and want to be more profitable at doing it.
All right. Awesome. Well, Adam, thanks for your time. It was a pleasure talking with you today, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Have a good one, man.
If you'd like to be featured on the Coach's Corner with Andy, email coach at 921thegoat.com.